when wild hogs start showing up inside residential areas. The question isn't what just happened, it's what's coming next. One intrusion turns into a pattern fast, and once windows are shattered and furniture is overturned in broad daylight, the safety people thought they had disappears overnight. This is not a random visit. It's a sign the boundary between human space and wildlife has been pushed dangerously close. If early intervention doesn't happen, the behavior almost always repeats, usually worse. That's when our team stepped in, to hold that line of safety before it vanished completely. After an incident like this, most people react the same way. They turn on lights, make noise, try to scare the hogs away. But once wild hogs become comfortable around humans, those tactics don't remove them. They only force them to adapt. They pull back to the edge of the neighborhood, shift their activity later into the night, then return when everything goes quiet. So our first objective wasn't to capture every hog on day one. The goal was to stop escalation, prevent a worst-case scenario over the next few nights, and regain control of the area quietly and safely. We started where the herd was already telling us the truth. Their route, behind a row of houses, a narrow trail ran like a hidden corridor. The lead boar used it consistently to return. That's where we placed the first trap, a drop cage trap positioned along that path. The moment the lead boar committed and moved into the zone, the trap was triggered. The response was fast, controlled, and designed to keep disruption to a minimum. But this wasn't a single animal problem. Wild hogs move as a sounder, a coordinated group that learns quickly. And once the group senses pressure, the entire strategy has to evolve. From there, the team shifted to a wooded area behind a parking lot, open enough for movement, but unpredictable in approach angles. In a spot like that, you don't want a setup that creates blind zones or corners the herd into panic. So we deployed a circular cage trap designed to allow entry from multiple directions. That reduces hesitation, limits blind spots, and lowers the chance of hogs bolting the moment they feel trapped. At first, the sounder tested the perimeter. Then they adapted. They stopped charging straight into the neighborhood. Instead, they hung back, watching from a distance, grouping up, then spreading out. That's classic sounder behavior. They move together to reduce risk, and they become more vigilant when they sense danger. So we didn't chase individuals. We targeted what made them powerful, their staging behavior, along the forest edge. The sounder had a consistent pause point, a place where they regrouped before pushing toward the houses. That's where we installed a corral trap. The logic was simple. Control the gathering point, and you control the movement. Once that staging zone was controlled, their biggest advantage, moving as a coordinated group, started to collapse. And when a sounder has already exploited a residential area multiple times, timing becomes everything. That's where systems like remote trigger trapping become critical. Instead of rushing activation, operators wait until the entire group is inside the safe zone. That prevents early triggers that panic the herd, fragment the sounder, and allow the smartest animals to slip away and teach the rest. At this stage, the operation stops being a few traps. It becomes a control network, multiple setups covering routes, staging points, and boundary corridors. Because one lesson always proves true. If you want real results, don't chase tracks. Control the gathering points, and manage the sounder as a whole. And the longer you wait, the faster they learn, and the harder they become to stop. Camera evidence is where most neighborhoods get surprised. The first few nights can look quiet, almost normal. Traps sit still, yards look untouched, and people assume the problem is past. But at dawn, fresh mud streaks along fences and new hoof marks cut through the same gas. The sounder never left. It simply shifted. And here's the danger. Every failed attempt doesn't erase the threat. It upgrades it. Wild hogs learn patterns faster than most people expect. If a trap only catches the boldest animals, the cautious ones don't disappear. They watch, they adjust their timing, and they start testing from wider angles. We began with compact box traps because residential areas demand tight footprints and low disruption. Placed along fence lines where the hogs were already traveling. They did exactly what small traps usually do. They influenced the closest approach. The cameras told the truth. Only the most confident individuals stepped in. The rest stayed back, spacing out, circling, and letting the group's smartest members evaluate the risk. So we expanded the capture zone. A suspended drop trap was set on the neighborhood edge. Bigger, sturdier, bait center to pull the entire sounder. Early passes looked promising. Then one mistimed trigger changed the entire game. The sounder wasn't fully inside. The moment the frame dropped, the group blasted backward into cover. No injury, no chaos, just a clean lesson for the hogs. The next night, they returned different. They kept distance. They circled wider. They split into smaller scouts, probing for the safest approach. At that point, it wasn't about trap size. It was about the sounder calculating the risk along its own route. That's when the strategy shifted from waiting to guiding. Instead of chasing wherever the herd appeared, we locked down movement corridors. The narrow connectors between forest edge and backyard, the gaps in brush, the field defense transitions, enclosure and corral systems were built to match the terrain and the recorded tracks. Not to startle the hogs, but to offer a safe-looking choice that aligned with their habits. The rule was simple. Let them commit fully before anything happened. No early pressure. No half captures. The moment the entire group fed comfortably inside the safe zone, the trigger became decisive. Because in residential control, the goal isn't a dramatic moment. It's a lasting result before the next intrusion becomes normal. But the hogs were still patrolling the boundary at night, and the cameras showed a new behavior. They were staging earlier, then waiting for the quietest window to move. If we misread that timing even once, they rear out for weeks and push the problem onto the next group. So the next step was remote monitoring and a tighter network. Multiple sites, one plan, activated only when a full sounder was present and visibility was clear. And what happened next proved whether this was controlled. By this point, the operation wasn't set a trap and hope. It was a pressure map. The sounder had two strengths, numbers and coordination. So every decision was built around breaking those advantages without turning the neighborhood into a disturbance zone. That meant fewer triggers, better timing, and setups that controlled space instead of chasing sightings. Remote monitoring became the difference maker. Cameras didn't just confirm presence, they revealed secrets. When the scouts arrived, we would pause which individuals tested bait first, and how long it took the rest to commit. The pattern was consistent. If the group sensed even a small mistake, an early trigger, a bad angle, an unfamiliar shadow, they didn't panic randomly. They reorganized. They shifted their approach lane, and they returned later with tighter spacing and higher caution. So we moved the focus to the place that mattered most, the staging zone. Every sounder has one, a safe edge where they gather before pushing into risk. In this case, it was the forest boundary behind the homes, just far enough to watch, close enough to strike. We treated that zone like the control switch, as we controlled the staging point. The neighborhood was protected even before they reached fences and yards. Multiple corral systems were placed along the boundary routes, but they weren't activated on the first opportunity. The team waited for one condition only: full commitment, when an entire sounder entered and settled into feeding behavior. The activation was clean and decisive. No half captures, no fragmented escape, no teaching moment for the smartest animals. That's what most people miss. Wild hog management isn't about winning a single night. It's about stopping repetition. Each time the sounder returns and finds the area harder to access, the risk-to-reward ratio flips. The neighborhood stops being worth it, and the results show up in small, powerful ways. Fewer fresh mud trails along fences, fewer nighttime patrol lines through backyards, fewer sightings at the edge of streetlights. Not because the animals vanished overnight, but because their movement was being managed, their routine disrupted, and their staging behavior broken. This is how real control works. Quiet, systematic, professional, not a fight against nature. Responsible intervention that restores the boundary before it disappears.